lovely people, I hope you're doing marvelously well. Of course, as ever, you can subscribe and hit the bell and you'll get a notification of a new video. You can also go to producelikeapro.com, sign up for the email list and get a whole bunch of free goodies. We've been going through a lot of the viewers' questions and there's some really, really good ones. And some of these are very, very commonly asked questions. So I want to address them.
Should I use pink noise to mix?
My answer is yes and no. Personally, I didn't even know about this till just a few years ago. I believe this has become prevalent with some people because of this. When you're working in EDM or pop music or anything that uses a lot of virtual instruments, a lot of virtual, keys and drums, percussive instruments, you name it. When you're working with virtual instruments, they are almost entirely pre-recorded with great compression and EQ and basically very, very even sounding. Mixing with the pink noise can work. Why is that? Well, when you're using organic instruments like acoustic guitars, pianos, drums, whatever, lots of organic instruments, they have massive dynamic ranges. And they don't just have dynamic ranges in, amplitude, in volume, they also have it in frequency response. What do I mean by that? Well, that big fat raspy pad or whatever we're talking about, a virtual pad, is not going to be the same as recording an orchestra. An orchestra is going to have like a lot of push and pull. There's going to be some low end which is growing, and then so mixing an orchestra with pink noise would never work, because at what point do you decide that it's blended right? What, that 4-bar section that works perfectly? Because the idea of pink noise, which I totally understand, is to get it so it's just audible and then bring it down so it sits in there. And you do that with multiple tracks, and then you take them all out of solo and you end up with a mix which is fairly balanced. The idea I get the idea of it, but it's only going to work with incredibly even sounding, even recorded, basically virtual instruments.
Can you tell us the name of the band you mixed after winning the mix shootout?
Okay, so when I was talking about winning the shootout, what I did is I had, in our reference mix video we did a couple of weeks ago, I talked about, taking the artist's mix and then listening to it and deciding what I did and didn't like about it and what I wanted to improve. The mix, the artist rough mix, was really, really good. It was a great mix. But the question is, who was that artist? Well, the artist was Rick Springfield. And, a lot of good friends of mine have worked with him. Tim Pierce, of course, has played and did play on this album. And this was a wonderful album. And I was blessed. Rick gave it to a lot of mixers and they chose my mix. And I ended up mixing the whole record. I think that's a great blessing. And look out for the album. It's a very good album. Incredible songs and insane musicianship on it.
When I'm using a reference track, can I use an MP3 or should I use a WAV file?
Wow, this is going to get super contentious. What do I honestly think? I mean, always, if you can, use a WAV file. Use the highest quality you possibly can. But if all you have is an MP3 and it's a track that is their rough mix and you're referencing it, then use it. Obviously, we'd all prefer the highest quality WAV file we can get every time. But a decent MP3 rough mix or reference mix is still going to tell you a lot. You're using their rough mix as a reference mix to get an idea of what they want, what their panning is, what automation. That's why you have the reference mix. So an MP3 is more than adequate to tell you that. Now, if you're trying to get an extended low end and you're trying to match some huge EDM track, an MP3 may not be that good. I mixed a French rock band a couple of years ago, and they were young, really young guys, and we sent them MP3s quickly to get notes from them while we were mixing here. They were in France, and they kept responding, what is up with the bottom end and the top end? We were sending them MP3s, and they were listening on a beautiful system, and they're super young, and they could hear the high end rolling off a little bit, and they couldn't quite hear the lows that they wanted. So I sent them a wave, and they were like, oh, that's better. So look, MP3s are not the worst thing in the world. But are they the greatest thing in the world? No. I mean, so many people cannot hear the difference. But the difference that is there is negligible, but there is a difference. I mean, there just is, but it's very, very subtle. And one of the things, of course, is that low end. If you're listening through a massive system, those super, super lows do actually disappear somewhat on the MP3. So, but again, it all comes down to this one simple question. If you've only got an MP3 as a reference, then it is good enough.
If I'm sent stems to play bass tracks on, am I responsible for a stereo mix, and should I print EQ, compression, or other effects? Should I consider myself an independent contractor, producer, or an artist working for a salary?
I think the short answer to that is define the role beforehand. But firstly, no. If you're simply hired as a bass player, it's just your job to record bass. And if you're doing it independently, not with the artist, not at the artist's studio or the producer's studio, then it's up to you to provide high quality, well-recorded bass tracks. You need to record really, really well. You need to either do it on your own with your own system or go to a friend's studio or hire a studio, whatever it is. You're responsible for not just putting the idea down, but putting a very well-recorded idea. If I'm going to hire Tim Pierce to play guitars at his home studio, those of you that have seen Tim's videos know that he has an amazing home setup. All of his gear is there. That's what Tim has to do in order to A, get the gig, and B, sustain a career. He has to give out the best quality stuff. When you receive tracks to play on, you have to record your guitars or your basses, or your drums or your vocals at the highest possible level. That is up to you. You can't just send them a DI and say, good luck. If you are using a DI guitar or bass and you're using an amp simulation, print it as well as sending the DI back. If there's a sound that you've got, you need to print it. You're not responsible for mixing those tracks that they've sent, but you are responsible for recording incredibly good sounds and also giving them a rough idea of how it should sound in their mix. Just a rough idea. I personally think if somebody's sending me tracks to do a guitar overdub, I'm fine with getting an instrumental without the guitars in, then I'll play against it. Or at the very least, like a stereo drums and then the rest of the instruments, if I want to push the drums louder. I don't feel like I need to have all of the tracks just to put down a lead guitar part. Always establish this stuff before you speak to the client. Make sure you have a good understanding of what is expected of you, and if they do want you to do a decent mix, then you might have to charge a couple of hours of your time to do a decent mix. But that should not be part of the job of a session player. And as far as how would you be paid, you should just build that into your fee. Your fee is playing bass on the song and recording it. If I hire Blair Sinter to record drums at his home studio, he just gives me a price. He doesn't go, it's $100 and my studio's $150 an hour. He doesn't do that. He's just like, if it's going to be an hour's worth of drumming, he goes, it's $250 to do those 2 or 3 songs or one song or whatever it might be. He gives me a fee that takes into account his own time and his studio time.
What should I use for a reference track if I'm mixing EDM?
You really have to go and check out the charts. You have to see what is current and huge in the world of EDM and just be aiming to get that at least every time. It's so difficult because it really depends on your source material. If you're mixing something which is all about a percussion element and a vocal, then it's so different to doing something which has a massive bottom end which is continually pumping the whole song. You've got to search out current songs that are in the top 40 that fit in your world, only because to do EDM, it's all about trying to find something new and refreshing. So you need to know what's new and refreshing. When you're mixing that kind of material, producing that kind of material, you need to reference whatever is the latest, hottest stuff that's on. So I would just literally open up the EDM charts and see what is doing really well and use that as your reference point to start. And search something that feels similar in your world. If you're doing something with huge bottom end, then find another song in that area and make sure you're at least competing with it. Thank you ever so much for watching. That was a lot of fun to take 5 questions like that. If you have questions, please leave them on the videos. I will do my best to answer them there, and we'll also cherry pick some of the best ones and bring them up here. I really, really appreciate you watching. Of course, please subscribe, hit the bell for notifications so you know when the latest video is coming out, and have a marvelous time recording and mixing, and have a happy new year.